Let's talk about one of the most incredible, high-stakes standoffs of the entire Cold War. It's a story of defiance, of unbelievable ingenuity, and of a city caught right in the crossfire of a new kind of global conflict. Today, we're diving deep into the Berlin Airlift.
So let's start with the central problem, the big question. Just imagine this for a second. You are responsible for 2 million people, and they are completely cut off, stranded deep inside hostile territory. Your opponent is basically daring you to either start World War III or just give up and let them starve. So what on earth do you do? This was the impossible choice facing the Western powers back in 1948.
Right, so how did this whole mess even start? To really get it, we need to rewind the clock back to the end of World War II and the fragile, kind of tense new reality it created for Germany and especially for the city of Berlin.
Okay, so after the war, the Allies, that's the US, the UK, France, and the Soviet Union, they carved up Germany into 4 zones, one for each of them. Seems simple enough, right? Well, not exactly. See, the real problem was Berlin. The capital city was also split 4 ways, but the whole city was located deep, deep inside the Soviet zone. This basically created a tiny island of Western democracy floating in a giant sea of Soviet communism. You can just feel the tension building already.
And this is where you really see that wartime alliance just falling apart at the seams. On one side, you've got the West. They want to rebuild Germany, turn it into a stable, democratic ally. On the other side, you've got the Soviets. They had been invaded by Germany twice in 30 years, and their vision was totally different. Strip Germany for everything it's worth, keep it weak forever, and make sure it could never, ever be a threat again. These two visions, yeah, they were on a collision course. So with two sides dug in like this, a fight was pretty much inevitable. And the trigger, the one little spark that finally lit the fuse, it was all about money. The Western powers are looking at their parts of Germany, and the economy is a wreck. So their solution seems pretty logical. Let's unite our zones into a new country, West Germany, and introduce a new stable currency, the Deutschmark, to get things moving again. For them, it was just a practical economic fix. But for the Soviets, oh no. They saw it as a declaration of economic war.
And this is so important to understand. Stalin didn't see economic recovery. He saw something he called dollar imperialism. He truly believed the West was using its money to build a rich, powerful capitalist enemy right on his front porch. To him, this was an aggressive move, a direct threat to his control over Eastern Europe, and he was not about to just let it happen. So this brings us to Stalin's response, and it was dramatic, it was ruthless, and it was a massive gamble. He decided to call the West's bluff by going after Berlin's biggest weakness, its location.
The response was immediate. I mean, literally the very next day, June 24th, 1948.
On that day, Stalin made his move. And it wasn't a warning shot. It was total. He sealed off every single land and water route into West Berlin. No trucks, no trains, no barges, nothing. Just like that, 2 million people were completely cut off from food, from fuel, medicine, literally everything they needed to survive.
And let's be brutally honest about what this was. This wasn't just some political game. The goal was to use hunger as a weapon. Stalin figured if he could make life miserable enough for the people of West Berlin, they'd have no choice but to turn their backs on the West and accept Soviet rule.
So this put the West, and especially President Truman in the US, in an absolutely impossible spot. If they try to ram through the blockade with armed trucks, it's almost certainly going to start World War III. But if they do nothing, well, they're abandoning 2 million people and handing Stalin a huge propaganda victory. What would you do?
But the answer they came up with? Well, nobody saw it coming, least of all Stalin. It was a plan so ambitious, so completely audacious that nothing like it had ever been tried before. They decided to go over the blockade.
And that, my friends, was the Berlin Airlift. The British called it Operation Plainfare. The concept sounds simple, right? Just fly supplies in. But the actual execution would be absolutely staggering. Supplying an entire city with everything from potatoes to coal, completely by air.
Okay, let's just try to wrap our heads around the sheer scale of this thing. The airlift ran non-stop for 318 days, for almost a full year, through a bitter, cold German winter and a blazing hot summer.
the skies over Berlin were never, ever quiet. Over that time, Allied pilots made more than 250,000 flights. Just think about that for a second. 275,000 separate trips, creating this constant, non-stop air bridge into a city under siege. It was a lifeline in the sky.
And what were they carrying? A mind-boggling 1.5 million tons of supplies. Every lump of coal to heat homes, every bag of flour for bread, every single thing that kept 2 million people from freezing or starving arrived by airplane. And just try to imagine the intensity of it all. At the peak of the operation, a plane was landing in West Berlin every 90 seconds, around the clock, 24/7, in good weather and bad. The logistics of it are just breathtaking. But we have to remember, this was incredibly dangerous work. This number, 79, represents the Allied airmen who lost their lives in crashes during the airlift. These were true heroes who died not in a battle, but on a mission of peace to keep a city free.
So, Stalin's big gamble? It completely and totally failed. He couldn't starve the city into giving up. But here's the thing. The end of the blockade wasn't the end of the story, not by a long shot. In fact, this is the moment where the divisions of the Cold War got set in concrete.
So what happened right away? Well, Stalin was publicly humiliated. The West, on the other hand, looks like heroic saviors. By May of 1949, Stalin quietly gave up and lifted the blockade. But the line in the sand had been drawn. The informal zones became two official, separate German countries, West Germany and East Germany.
And this just kicked off a massive chain reaction. The whole crisis convinced the West they needed a formal military pact for self-defense. And boom, NATO was born in 1949. A few years later, the Soviets created their own mirror image alliance, the Warsaw Pact. The two armed camps that would dominate world politics for the next 40 years, they were now officially in place. So you see, the Berlin Airlift was this huge turning point. That famous phrase Winston Churchill coined, the Iron Curtain. After this, it wasn't just a metaphor anymore. It became a hard reality. A real, physical, fortified border that would slice the continent of Europe in two for decades. Which leaves us with a final, really complicated question. The Berlin Airlift was, without a doubt, a stunning humanitarian victory, a triumph of human spirit. But in saving West Berlin, did it also harden the division so much that it locked the world into the next 40 years of the Cold War? It's a powerful legacy and definitely something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me.